First tonight, protecting Perth's heritage. There's a long list of developments planned for the CBD, including the waterfront project and connecting the city to Northbridge by sinking the rail line. But there's also a lot of work being done to restore the city's past. Jake Sturmer has more.
I see your shadow on the street now. I hear you.
Sadly, we've lost things like the ANZ building, the old CMLA building, more chambers, St George's chambers behind St George's Cathedral. The list is really endless.
It seems an age since I've seen ya. Countdown as the weeks trickle in.
We lose part of our past, we lose part of our sense of place, and an important part of our history. This used to be the site of the Bank of Adelaide building, which was a beautiful first gold boom, so 1890s, 1900s building with a spire on the corner of Barrack and the Terrace here.
Here marks the start of a somewhat unconventional tour of Perth's lost heritage treasures.
It was demolished, sadly, in the 1980s to make way for the present building on this site. And it's one of the many that was lost during that period of development during the 70s and the 80s, even into the 1990s.
Boom time then. Boom time now.
There has been a lot of talking, a lot of designs and discussion about the Perth waterfront over at least the last 30 years. The project now is formally underway.
So, during this period of prosperity, is there much heritage at risk?
The area that we're in is heritage listed itself. There is a building behind us, the kiosk, which was built in 1928 as a tea room and changing rooms for this pleasure area. That's under threat at the moment. Why not make it a feature of this new development?
So the waterfront development, there's no doubt it will impact on some heritage elements. It will also encapsulate other heritage elements, and it will enhance some heritage elements, so that there are some things that we will lose and there are some things that we will gain out of it.
Ian Hocking is a heritage architect advising the government on the waterfront development.
I am telling them that what they are intending to do there is consistent with the structure of Perth, and it is necessary in this day and age for us to have that interaction between the river and the city, which we've lost for a long time.
Mr Hocking knows a lot about Perth's inner workings. He's made a career out of restoring some of the city's most iconic landmarks. Take the Perth Town Hall, for example.
Well, we're now entering what is now the supper room. It used to be where the council had their council chamber. But when it was a council chamber, it didn't have these very pleasant windows, it didn't have the high ceiling. It was lit by a gas lamp. All of the councillors were men and most of them smoked cigars, so it was a fairly unholy place to be.
Bit of a boys' club.
Definitely a boys' club. We made this into a hall which can have both receptions and have performances, and we've brought it up to contemporary standards, and so it's had a lot of technology put into it.
A restoration that was ultimately started and finished by the Court family.
If you look back to what Perth aspired to be in the 1960s, and Sir Charles Court made a very interesting statement in a current affairs bulletin of the day, where he wished to get rid of the fustiness of the brick and the tile of Perth and replace it with the steel and glass that would make it a city of the 21st century. At the same time, when his son became Premier, he initiated the Perth the City for People project, which had things like the Town Hall as the centrepiece of new public spaces.
The goal that we have set out to achieve is to make Perth the most beautiful capital city in the world.
And in 2008, 7 years after leaving office, more of Richard Court's vision began to be realised when the restoration of St George's Cathedral was completed, also by Ian Hocking.
We've refurbished all of the clear windows and all of the stained glass windows, and then we've had to go right over all the stonework and the brickwork. We've also had to earthquake-proof the building, so there was about 5 years of research.
And the only visible structural intervention, this corona hidden above the high altar.
Well, it is there if you know to look for it, yes. And we wanted not to obtrude on anybody's worship experience when they're in the cathedral.
The state government's ambition for the area to become a heritage precinct is starting to take shape, with the old Treasury building next door set to be refurbished and restored, eventually creating a luxury hotel and office. But heritage isn't always an easy thing to deal with for developers.
It's certainly a more complex and risky type of a project when you are dealing with heritage buildings. There are a number of risks, such as there are maintenance risks, there are structural repair risks that you're accepting.
It's not all bad. Tim Mack is helping develop the hotel and knows heritage projects have their benefits too.
There's a saying in property that thing about land is they're not making any more of it, and a similar philosophy can apply to heritage buildings. Once you've got something which you know can't be replicated, you've got a fantastic thing, a fantastic asset that you know you've got a unique position in the market.
Something the developers of the WD and HO Wills building clearly understand.
It's been adapted from a warehouse. As you can see, if you look up, there are 2 or 3 extra stories being put on the top, in a very sympathetic style to the rest of the building, really respecting the architecture.
So much so, it won an award from the Heritage Council in 2009.
There's an old fallacy that if a building is heritage listed, as this one is, it's state listed, you can't do a thing to it. Well, this proves you certainly can, and you can give it a very viable future.
So, during this period of great development and great change in the city, heritage lovers like Richard Offen are doing their best to prove that history is worth keeping.
I always say, if you can't see where you've been, how do you know where you're going?
Jake Sturmer reporting there.